I hold a different view with a representative from the University of Cape Town, if I'm not mistaken, that the intake of students from your advantage institutions, be it TAX, UCT, Rhodes University, and the intake of students from Tshwane University of Technology and Unisa in particular, those students will normally be coming from historically disadvantaged backgrounds. And in particular, those who are called in Unisa, your full-time students, even if we are an open distance learning institution, but you have students coming here on a daily basis, and those students, they regard themselves as full-time students. And majority of those students, they'll be dependent on NSFAS, for an example. I'm a beneficiary of NSFAS myself. And you can't tell me that if I'm academically deserving and I'm a beneficiary of NSFAS, and I'm being told by the institution that funds of NSFAS are depleted, then my approach should be a romantic approach towards the institution. I will encourage students who are academically deserving to protest, but however, when they protest, we as the SRC would ensure that everything they do is within the parameters of the law. Thanks.
Prof, we earlier asked the question of how management seriously takes issues that concern students. What do you think is the attitude of management in dealing with student issues?
I think we cannot have one size fits all. And I think what Mpho has actually put on the table, and in a manner that is quite strong, is the issue of our history. That we cannot pretend that apartheid did not happen. And what he was also saying is that we must also understand that you have the still privileged and advantaged universities, and you still have the still disadvantaged universities, and still disadvantaged majority. And then one must also almost dissect that notion of disadvantage. The first thing that he talks about is the issue of the geographic disadvantage. Most of the universities are located in the cities, away from where the majority of people are. So they have to travel long distances. So they already spend a lot of money coming to those institutions. The second disadvantage is what I call the academic disadvantage. Most of those students come from backgrounds where the schools are broken. So for them even to come at university, they must have done quite a lot in themselves to get at the doorstep of a university. Then the third disadvantage is the financial disadvantage. They come from where they're supported by parents who are mostly pensioners, who are unemployed. So we must, when we begin to approach managerial concerns, we must also be able to know who we are bringing. And he's also correct that the Department of Higher Education must play a role here to appreciate these concerns. Then there's also what I call cultural disadvantage, where you find that most of what gets studied is so unrelated to the students' main realities. I've taught in the United States, I've taught in the UK. You find that the students are able to relate to whatever is put before them. It is still scandalous that you find in this country that most of the books, even literature, are books about the people in Europe. We are not even unable to prescribe books written. I mean, you don't find books by Sobukwe, you don't find books about the Biko, you don't find even books about Mandela in this country. But that shows the extent to which we still are culturally colonized. So when we talk about liberation, it must have those three elements. And management must, especially when it comes to resources, when it comes to these financial and the academic exclusions, must be sensitive and put in place to make sure that those who have managed to get to the door, they are not actually pushed outside. So, but what you often find is that because the discourse that we get is the discourse of what the people call managerialism and marketization, we are not able to bring these issues that the young people are putting on the table to simply saying, if the students work hard, and actually when I used to run an institution, one of the things that I said to the former minister, that a student who does well cannot be returned. So we're not saying all of them needs to be there. Those who don't perform and are unwilling to perform, then you cannot make a case. But this academically deserving students cannot be excluded or should not be excluded in our institutions.
Lwazi, an argument is being put forward here that you are sort of in a more comfortable situation, and therefore your struggles are different. Do you feel that you are in a comfortable situation? That's why you can't strike, because you know everything it's nice for you there? Let's hear Lwazi first. We'll come back to you, Brett.
Struggles are different, especially pertaining to students from working class backgrounds at historically advantaged institutions. An example of such, there's high rate of academic and financial exclusion at my university in particular, which is a historically advantaged institution. The issues pertaining to cultural capital at which the institution does not take hold of. The issues such as how a student is supposed to articulate themselves in the English language, or even be able to relate to the academic work. So the major issues pertaining to how previously historically advantaged and currently advantaged institutions are sort of like European bridges and not actually African-based institutions. So the University of Cape Town prides itself in this issue of an Afropolitan university, in which we as an SRC have challenged on many occasions. We're saying that this institution is a European institution that simply is situated in Africa. And that is not what can happen in our higher education context. And that is why we need to transform higher education, not only from historically disadvantaged institutions, and also those who are currently advantaged and previously advantaged, in order for them to suit the needs of our country.
You seem to disagree with what's being said here, Mboniseni. What's your take on what Lwazi has just articulated?
Well, look, man, it's very funny to try to understand why they do not strike. Because I mean, when you follow what they normally demand, it's normally issues like Jacob's trophy. They don't want big pens; they want pilot pens. Different from what we want when we say we want a proper accommodation, we want NSFAS, we want to have more research-based funding, etc. and etc. Because these problems that are faced by institutions such as UCT are problems, they're not the same as TUT, because TUT is having problems which we got from the merger. Remember that TUT came from a racist institution, a technical in Pretoria. Now, when they realized they're losing power, they had to create problems that we cannot solve in 5 years or 10 years. So it's very deep. I agree with Mpho that it can't have a romantic approach. But my take on the issues would be that let us first centralize the kind of education we want to give to young people. And that should be education that is willing to address the socio-economic challenges of South Africa, such as unemployment, inequalities, and poverty. Now, when you go to privileged universities where you would have an SRC that has a checkbook, you would have an SRC that has all the privileges as a minister, to an extent the blue light is different from me and Mpho here, who would have students who are eating spato and they have students who are eating a pizza. So the approach obviously would mean what kind of students do we have and the approach to it. I mean, a student from Marabas, from Mabopane will not have the necessary financial resources to go to Cape Town. So they will go to Unisa or TUT. When they go to VETS or UP just across the street, they will be told of many ridiculous requirements that do not respond to the challenges of the economy.
Brad, they're saying that you're having it soft. Your struggles are different, and all you want are checks and pizzas that you have, what you have for lunch. Do you think that's an argument to put forward? The argument is being put forward to you that your struggles are easier. You have it easy, and therefore you can't strike. Do you feel that you have it easy? You don't have struggles, issues that are similar to TUT or any other previously disadvantaged institutions?
I think every campus in the university sphere of South Africa faces a couple of challenges that are universal. For instance, our big challenge, what we're trying to sort out now, is a challenge of access, where we have a very residential based campus, that then half of the students live in the middle Grahamstown, and they don't have the same access to internet, to the library, to dining halls as your resident students would. And our major challenge this year is, and I think this is universal to every other campus, and every other campus is dealing with this differently, but student transport is extremely vital in terms of making things more accessible to the entire student population. And that's one thing that we have actually, we had a strike last year, just on that issue alone. But I mean, like I said when I spoke for the first time, is that we have different protests and different kinds of protests that we have here. For instance, every year we have the silent protest, which is a mass demonstration of students and staff members and members of Grahamstown communities.
All right, Brett, let's quickly take the headlines where we'll come back and proceed with the show. We're back right after this.
Thanks, Tali.
News headlines on Unisa Radio.
You guys are raising a very important issue.
In your headlines this hour, protesters fired with rubber bullets. South Africa could mean a country without a name, and Unisa to remember Monday. These headlines and more at the top of the hour. To Mboniseni, stay tuned.
So you could also go to you see black people are made to carry the same burden.
Dumela, I'm WHP and I'm a One member. One is a movement of 3 million people in Africa and around the world fighting the injustice of extreme poverty together. A single person's voice may go unheard, but if we come together as one,